is the theme to the show. The show is all about you. Not Jeff, but you and your story. Because everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Brought to you by JeffSeltzer.com.
Hello and welcome to Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer. I am your host, Jeff Seltzer, and this is episode 57 of my own personal midlife crisis. Thanks again for joining, as always. This has been an exciting time, exciting week, the last week and a half. Let's go back about 2 weeks or so and relive where we were. So about 2 weeks ago, guess give or take, I turned 48, which is super exciting. You know, it's halfway to 96. Maybe it's a milestone, maybe not. I'm not really sure. Also, as I was informed later that day or later that week, it was also National Podcast Day. So I didn't know until that day that my birthday is actually a National Podcast Day, which is purely coincidental, or maybe it's fate from the above or the universe. I'm not really sure. Whatever it is, it's just a kind of a cool little data point that it is. I mean, it could have been National Crouton Day. It could have been, National Take Your Daughter to School Day. But no, it's National Podcast Day. So that is where we live. About a week and a half later, so this past week was my older daughter's 18th birthday, which is also pretty insane. I don't know that I feel old enough to have a daughter who's 18 years old. She's amazing. Absolutely love Robin to death. But it's a weird time to kind of look at it and say, hey, I have a kid who's, a senior in high school, going to go to college soon, stuff like that. So a lot of processing and a lot of things that are there to unpack with that. And the day after that was both my younger daughter's half birthday, as well as my 21st wedding anniversary, which also feels really weird. Absolutely love the fact that I've been married for 21 years to my best friends, together for almost 24 years at this point. But the thought that I've been married to my wife for 21 years is super, super just crazy to process. But when you have a great partner, time definitely flies. We went out to dinner that night and went to a restaurant. It was really good. The waitress asked how long we were married for and said 21 years, and she didn't believe it. She said we looked too young to have been married for 21 years. I, of course, quickly responded back with, we got married in high school, so that's how you explain it. My wife quickly corrected me and said, no, that didn't happen. So here we are, married 21 years, absolutely love it, and life is exciting, right? A lot of things going on. So trying to make the most of my life, not let it pass me by, have some fun, and keeping in mind, too, that, my time with my kids in my house is limited as they get older and go to college and, start lives of their own. So definitely want to make the most memories that I can with them, along the way. Wanted to get into the plugs for the show for this week, as always. So as you guys probably know, the show can be found on Instagram at Everybody Has a Story Pod. My personal Instagram is at Seltzer77. The show's TikTok is also at Everybody Has a Story Pod. You can email the show directly at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. For all things Jeff Seltzer, you can go check me out over at jeffseltzer.com. The YouTube for the show is at Everybody Has a Story Pod. You can find the show on video on Spotify and YouTube, audio in those two locations, plus everywhere else. That includes Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Pandora. Pretty much anywhere you could find a podcast, you could probably find this show. With that said, I did want to introduce my guest for this week. Really, really exciting. I've known her now for almost a decade, which is really insane. Like I said before, time passes by very quickly. I first met this lady back in January of 2016. So if my math is correct, which sometimes it is, and I like to think that it probably is, it's been almost a decade. Stephanie, how are you today?
I'm good. Love the intro. I don't even know that was the date, but that's the date.
It is. I mean, I'm quirky and weird with numbers. On a side note, before getting into you, Stephanie, I keep reading and seeing headlines and articles that certain politicians keep talking about being able to bring down prices by 1,600% or
That's
14.
amazing.
It's amazing. Basically, what they're doing is they're going to pay you 16 times the current price to take it, which doesn't make any sense. So I did post on my personal Instagram this morning that we should all probably agree that 100% means that it's free. Anything more than 100% taken down means they're going to pay you to take it. So for those of you that aren't necessarily, let's say, at the level for math, that's the way it is. If somebody says they're going to give something to you for 450% off, unless it's something bad, probably take the deal and take the cash that goes along with it too. Would you agree?
Yeah, that just makes you think about the extreme couponers, how they get money back at the cash register. It's just everybody's just going to have that. It's like a nice ATM situation we got going on.
That sounds great. So, I mean, our topic for this week is going to be about mental health. But if I can, get my Xanax, let's say 1,500% off, meaning not only do they give me the pills, but they also pay me 16 times or whatever what I usually pay. That sounds amazing, right?
I could stop looking for like another way to make side money.
Okay, well, we've gotten ahead of ourselves here. So, Stephanie, I've given a little bit of an intro, but would you mind telling us who is Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I am probably, I would say, a proud Italian American. I am first generation in America here. I also am a proud pirate. I graduated from Seton Hall twice, undergrad and my master's, my MBA.
Nice.
I am a mother of two wonderful little girls. It's been a wild ride. I think from before they were in my life, I was pretty much a perfectionist, and then found that pretty quickly to be a very challenging thing to do as a parent. So I like to say that I'm a struggling perfectionist at this point. And then, I'm happily married. I've been with my husband for 19 years, married for 9 of those years. I like to travel. I don't travel well, but I like to travel. And when I get to the destination, it's definitely worth the anxiety of being on a plane and making it across the ocean. I have a lot of love for my family and friends. So as many times as I can, I'm trying to connect with them. Have a lot of family traditions we like to do, and I hold those dear to my heart. But yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell, I think.
Awesome. Well, so first of all, thank you for joining, Stephanie. I know we've chatted on and off for the last year and a half since the podcast started. I've tried to have ideas or reasons to bring you on. We finally, I think it was, so we're recording this on Sunday. I think it was Friday. We were texting back and forth, and I was like, hey, you want to? And you're like, sure, let's do it. So I guess it was right place, right time, right mindset, and we got there. On a side note to anybody listening, I think last week I had advertised at the end of the episode that I was going to have a solo pod this week because I didn't have a guest. And as I've mentioned in the past, oftentimes getting a guest is the most difficult part of the show. Like recording, it's not that tough. Producing, editing, publishing, all that kind of stuff, while it is work, it's not that tough. The most challenging part is dealing with other people and scheduling and keeping people to a schedule and getting people on. I did have, in a different universe or a different timeline, let's say, I did have another guest or set of guests for today. For personal reasons, they had to bail. Totally get it. It is what it is. So I was going to talk this week, as I think I ended last week's episode, talking about Halloween Horror Nights and me vomiting in a Chili's bathroom. I'm going to keep that as a teaser, let's say, of sorts. And I'll talk about that probably in a few weeks. Maybe next week, maybe the week after. Who knows, whenever it will be. But if you ever do want to hear about me getting sick in a Chili's bathroom, which happened in Florida in my trip last month, stay tuned. It's coming at some point, much like the vomit did. Cool. So with that said, this is October 2025, and it is also, keep me honest here, Mental Health Awareness Month. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. So with Mental Health Awareness Month being obviously something that's top of mind, no pun intended, did want to talk a little bit about obviously the importance behind it, right? So I'm 48 years old. I'm not going to age Stephanie, but she is younger than I am. And growing up, mental health was never really something that was, let's say, top of mind for people, right? Like things just happened. People just accepted it as that's who so-and-so is, and that's how they are. Like things just happened. But like it wasn't really as much of a focus as it is today, or as much as it should have been. Before talking to Stephanie about this, let me just kind of give my own little life experiences here. So growing up, without realizing it, I did have a lot of anxiety. There were things that I experienced and things that I did and ways that I acted that I didn't realize at the time they were kind of triggered from, like, let's say, earlier life experiences or just the way that I'm wired, that as I've gotten older, and when I say gotten older, it's probably not even the last like 10 years or so that I've recognized that I have this. So it was like late 30s or early 40s that I finally recognized, like, hey, I have anxiety and there's certain triggers and things do happen from them. Fortunately, now that mental health is a lot more top of mind for people and for society, it's more acceptable, right? Like there were obviously, let's say, less than positive or stellar stereotypes that went along with talking about mental health. I'm going to try to be as honest as possible here, but also obviously walking a thin line here because I'm not an expert and I want to make sure I'm not giving any advice to other people because, again, this is something where it's a very serious topic and you should probably talk to family, friends, as well as mental health specialists, therapists, whatever, if you do have things that you need help with. But what I will say is, anything that I do share, if there are any things that I do that maybe help you, send me a message and ask about my experience personally, offline or whatever else like that. So again, growing up, I did have anxiety. Growing older, I also had anxiety. Eventually, it kind of came to a point where I recognized, like, hey, like this is really a thing, and did a lot of research. Went to a therapist and kind of figured out like what are triggers, what are ways to kind of like work around it. So earlier today, I was doing some research to kind of set up the episode, and I saw somebody posted, and I agree with the statement. I think anxiety is caused by your inability to tolerate uncertainty. Which I definitely think, at least for myself, that's a big piece of it, right? So obviously there are things that just happen randomly, but at the same time, for me personally, uncertainty or not knowing what's going to happen oftentimes is a trigger. For me, I'd say that's why I'm probably as much of a planner as I am. That's why the joke's always, Jeff creates trackers for everything. Like it really is, because then I can use trackers to kind of like look at trends and figure out like, hey, when should I expect things? What are the causes? And if you have enough data, you can look at it and say, okay, most of the time, this is caused by X, Y, or Z. I do various other things that I do, once anxiety like kicks in to kind of like help myself or fix myself. But before going, I guess, too deep or more into myself, or whatever, let me ask Stephanie. So from a mental health perspective, like what is your perspective? How do you experience it? And kind of just like at a macro level, kind of like talk to a little bit.
Yeah. So I had a very similar experience to you in terms of like not knowing that I had it, right? I fortunately and unfortunately found out that I had it in a very extreme situation where my house got smashed by a truck. And at that point in time, I've been to therapists. I've been doing therapy for a long time. I was a kid that was always in the guidance counselor's office, always trying to recognize like what are the issues, how do we solve them, how do we get through them, and like game plan, scenario plan, whatever it is. But I think it wasn't until I was sitting right in front of a psychologist, and he literally handed me a piece of paper that had the definition of anxiety. And I was just like, wait a second, this is what does that, what? I don't understand. Like, this is what I have. Like, this is a thing. Like, and I think from there, my anxiety definitely had progressed farther than I had ever experienced it. And what had started happening is I got panic attacks, and there was a lot of physical pain that went along with this mental distress, right? And I think that you don't really fully understand that it's possible that your thoughts can cause physical pain.
Yep.
I was in and out of hospitals for several months for panic attacks, being treated for them, but not getting the right care. I think that I've also, like you, have done a lot of research on this, even with having a therapist, going outside of that and doing my own research, trying to understand as well. And, there's like a couple of really good like Netflix documentaries too. I forget what's the name of the guy that plays like Superbad, or what was his name? He had a documentary with his therapist, and it was on Netflix, and I learned a lot from that as well. And just some general research. But you do find that like there's a lot of success factors in coupling therapy with medicine. And once I understood that and got to that point, it was a game changer for my life. And like, I've now just celebrated 3 years of not having a panic attack. My last visit to the hospital for my mental health and such crazy distress. And my life has been just progressively better and better and better and better. I think what you said is very true about, future uncertainty. I think the way that, the practice, right, when you're talking to a therapist, when you're going through it, is really about being present and mindful. But I also, in the past couple of months, have realized that like, I wouldn't be me without my anxiety, right? And my brain wouldn't do the crazy problem solving or the game planning if it didn't have the ability to do that. That's driven from anxiety. But I think it's like learning to be actively involved in your anxiety and making sure that you have the right healthy balance. But I recently have turned around from like, this is a problem in my life, to this is part of my personality, part of who I am, and part of my superpower.
Yeah. So I'll let you unload it there and let you unpack. So thank you so much for sharing that, Stephanie. I mean, what I would say is I agree. It's the butterfly effect, right? That basically, like, they say your experiences kind of create who you are. So for me, like, I look back at my anxiety and everything I've dealt with and kind of how I've gotten to today. And like, without my anxiety, like, to your point, I don't know that would have been as successful, I guess you could say, personally as I am. Um, B, I'm a natural de-escalator. I think I try to, lower the temperature and kind of like, calm things down. I mean, probably selfishly, because I don't want to deal with the anxiety of like the unknown and the explosions and such like that. Additionally, I think it's my own personal anxiety that's led me to try to help as many other people as I can. So from a personal finance perspective, like you've seen it and you've experienced it yourself. Like I'll sit down with whoever wants to talk to walk them through my system of investing, of personal finance, of planning, of modeling. And a lot of that comes from the fact that, like, for the first, let's say, 35 or 40 years of my life, I had no idea about any of this stuff. And that could be a big anxiety for a lot of people, right? Is, am I going to have enough money to retire? Am I going to go broke? Can I afford this? Whatever. So trying to kind of like help other people like deal with something that could very much be a big anxiety trigger, before it kicks off. Other things too, like for me, I try to mentor as much as possible and teach and train, because growing up or even like early in my career, I never had somebody like that. And for me, that was always an anxiety in the fact that like I felt that like I was at a disadvantage. I felt like nobody was trying to help me. So I do everything I can to go out of my way to help those around me, so that way they don't have to experience that as well. So while, I mean, maybe, on a minor level, it'll help my anxiety a little bit, I guess proactively, I'm trying to prevent other people from getting anxiety, right? It's projecting. And I fully get that. I fully recognize that or whatever. But like for me, I do think that I'm doing some good work in terms of help people out like that. So we all deal in different ways. Like that is, I'd say, one way that I do, I guess, externally. I have some internal things that I'll get into in a bit. But I think externally, it's one thing I do is try to look at it and pay it forward and say, hey, I've experienced that before. It didn't feel good. How do I make sure other people don't experience that? And how can I give them kind of solves before it gets there,
Yeah. And so like I have immigrant parents, right? So, and, crazy story back and forth in that situation. But I similarly didn't have help doing homework, right? So like, and, for the first several years of my academic career, right, I was behind, right? And so I've always felt that being behind, right, and being worried that I wasn't ever going to get ahead, right? So even when I got to college, as the first one in my family to go to college, I was like, I'm never going to graduate on time, right? So like I start taking more classes and I'm acing them and I'm going, but I have the most credits out of all my friends, right? And I'm doing literally homework while we're out at a party, waiting for like, to finish that and then go out and have a good time, right? But to the point that I ended up with 2 majors and a minor, because I realized that I was going to end up graduating a semester early and I didn't want to, right? But like my anxiety of like, I want to graduate, I need to do this, I'm the first one going to college, like, and pushing myself to being like the best in my class, the best on top of it, the amount of hours and the planner that I had at the time was insane. Like I could tell you exactly what I was doing for what minute, what time of the day, and just making sure that like everything was scheduled. The paper was scheduled, the test was scheduled, the study time for that, like everything up to like even fun time. Like I think that's like the thing that you start to lose track of, right? Is that the have fun is not as important as getting these things done, because they don't relieve your anxiety, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say this too. So like, much like yourself, I am very much a planner. Like I plan everything out. Maybe I plan more than most people, maybe even yourself as well, that I've basically planned out the day that I'm probably going to eventually pass away. So we'll see if that comes to fruition or what that looks like. But like, joking aside, like for me, like I've got the next few years of vacation planned. I've got my whole like career and retirement planned. So much so that like, I have trouble, let's say like day 1 on vacation, I have a lot of trouble. Generally, it's not until like day 2 or so that I can fully relax and kind of enjoy it and kind of get into it. Because I don't know what it is, but like for me, like on that first day, I'm kind of afraid that things aren't going to go as scheduled or as planned. Like, I don't know, we're kind of going like, years ago, when I used to go on vacation, what I would do is I would get a massage before I went on vacation. The thought process being maybe it'll help me to relax before I get onto vacation. It works sometimes it doesn't, because I mean, some of it is physical. And as you mentioned before, for yourself, like for me, oftentimes my stress and my anxiety manifests in physical ailments. Like I've had lots of issues where like my body tightens up or whatever, just based on stress. So I'm trying to, I guess, overplan and try to take care of all the different things that could hit me before it actually does. it's probably also part of the reason why I try to plan vacations for as long as possible, because I recognize that day one could be a wash. So I want to try to make sure I'm enjoying as much time as possible as I am. Do you like, obviously I'd imagine you and your family don't plan vacations like I do, because, you know, we're just very different. But like from your perspective, like, do you have any challenges with like looking towards the future for like planning or traveling and stuff like that? Or is that not necessarily something that kind of hits you?
So for me, I think a lot has changed when my first child was born. Um, she was born with a cleft lip, and we had no idea that that was going to happen. And I think that same year, right, like our house got smashed by a truck, and like we had just paid it off, right? So like, you know, I had, prior to this, my childhood home was on a foreclosure. So I had always been like, all right, when I get to it, I'm going to make sure, like, I planned to purchase a house. I purchased my house at 25. Like, I made sure that we paid it off. Like, we paid it off. We had our daughter, you know, all these things start to happen where you start to realize you have no control. Like, I couldn't control that she had a cleft lip. That was a random circumstance. I couldn't stop a drunk driver to smash my newly paid off, newly renovated house, right? And that was like my game plan, right? That was the house that I was going to retire in. I was going to buy a different house. This was perfect for my whatever. And like, you're thinking and you're planning so many years out. And I think that for me, what I started to cling on more than planning is creating flexibility. I start thinking about how I can handle things in a different way, and then having multiple options, right? I don't have just one option, one game plan. I have multiple ways of thinking about it. And like, if something falls off, I just move on to the next thing. And so like, that's really been helping me a lot. I haven't planned as much. My husband does the planning for vacation. That kind of stuff stresses me out. I'm also not very good at it, right? I definitely try to I have goals, like yearly goals of things that I would like to achieve. And I try to work towards them. But I found that like, now that I've let go of some of that planning, I've been a little bit better with my anxiety, because I'm like, a lot more things are outside of my control. And so controlling the controllables is like really like one thing that's helped me with mine, right? Can I control it? Can I change my attitude towards it? If I can't, then it's something I can't do, right? And therefore it's outside of my environment, it's outside of what I can do, and I have to let it go, right? And that's a very difficult thing to do.
Yes.
And it's definitely been one of the things I have done in the past 3 years to get better.
So I'll say, I mean, I agree with you, trying to kind of let go. And to your point, I always say to control the controllables, but there are certain things in life that you have no control over, right? Like politics. Things happen, good, bad, and different. We can do nothing about it. You know, you can get worried about it, upset about it, which some of us do. But at the same time, there's legitimately very little you can do it on an N=1 level. What I will say from a personal perspective, personal finance is something I got deeper into, in the fact that, like, you know, as I got older, I recognized that I want control over my money. I spent about a year and a half, maybe like 8 or 9 years ago, and I had a personal financial advisor who invested my money for me. I found that when that was happening, I did more research, more investigation, and more looking into it, that it really just increased my anxiety. So I kind of eventually pulled back. Plus the fact they were charging 1.5% of all gross assets, really, the cost structure didn't make me happy. And the fact that basically I was paying 1.5%, so I can get probably the same results that I would have gotten on my own, maybe pull it back. So that's probably a poor example. But I'll say, like, you know, on some vacations, you know, Beth will oftentimes plan it for us. Sometimes I'll do it. You know, again, having a great partner definitely helps in the fact that, like, she knows what I like and she knows what I want. And like, we have, you know, honest and clear conversations on what the vacation looks like. So that way it does calm me down a bit, knowing that, like, hey, it's going to be fine, it's under control and stuff like that. Question I do have for you. So from a short-term perspective, obviously there's long-term stuff that we do to try to avoid anxiety and various challenges. Are there any things that you have that help you out, like, you know, when something hits? Like for me, I'll say personally, music is a big one. So if anybody ever looks at my Apple Music library, you'll see probably 1,000 different playlists. And they're all labeled kind of weirdly, largely because oftentimes I'll create a playlist based on how I'm feeling at the moment. whether it be hard songs, soft songs, content songs, whatever, and I'll title it based on the meaning. So that way I look at it and I'm like, I can look back. So at the time I can listen to it and it kind of soothes me. But then also long term, I can look back and remember what I was experiencing or feeling at that time. Additionally, I'll journal sometimes, kind of write down how I'm feeling. Because for me, I oftentimes think that like when I'm in a weird experience, I don't want to gaslight myself later on to say it wasn't that bad or oh, it was fine or whatever. This way, by looking back at the content of the conversation, of the situation, whatever, I can look at it and say, okay, you're right. Those people were not great. Or, you know what, Jeff, you're overreacting right now. Whatever it is, I want to make sure that I'm not lying to myself about what the experience really was. And lastly, before I get, let you respond, I do have a number of, let's say, movies that I probably watch very frequently. I know people who try to only watch movies once and watch something different, but I have a lot of, I guess, it's like comfort movies. Like people have like comfort food and comfort stuff. But there are a number of movies that like I'll watch all the time. Like Back to the Future is a movie that I'll put on whenever I'm feeling a certain way. And by the end, I feel much better. Like I know it's going to happen. There's not really an extra undue stress. And it just makes me feel good. Now, sometimes I'll skip parts 2 and 3 because they kind of aren't nearly as good as the first one. But the first one is fantastic. That Office Space, which I'll watch quite a bit, that just kind of like helps me out a little bit. I have other movies like that too. With that said, are there things that you do on like a short-term basis, like when you're in the situation, like if something's happening or mentally you've just been triggered, that kind of like you do? Like, do you take a walk? Do you do certain things? Like, kind of walk me through your process if you have one.
There is 2 things that I do. The first thing is I start to talk to myself in third person, right? So in my head, it's just like what you just said, Jeff, this and this, like this is what's realistic and whatever.
Yep.
My therapist had helped me understand, like, would you talk to a friend or a family member that way, the way that you're talking to yourself in your head at this moment, right? And the answer is no, you wouldn't. Right. You wouldn't be that cruel to yourself, to other people as you are to yourself, right? Yep. And so the first thing is immediately check my tone, right? Like in my head, what's going on? Am I being completely mean and catastrophizing? What is it that's happening? The second thing that I do is probability versus possibility. I think that was a very, very strong learning I got from another therapist, where, everything's not black and white. There's bad, good, and then there's just indifferent. And if you think about all the scenarios that you're running through your head, what is the probability versus the possibility? Like, it may be possible, but is it probably going to happen?
Right.
Probably not. Right. And I do at times like find myself like thinking through, 5 scenarios on something that just happened. And most of the time, none of those 5 things are actually the result of what actually happens. And then I'm like, yeah, you just wasted all that time in your head and energy on something that wasn't even going to happen because it was never had that high probability of happening. Right. So I think it's those 2 things for sure. I think, I just had another thought, but I just lost it. But yeah, so those are the first 2 things that I do, right? Just talk to myself, go through it and think it through.
Yeah. So I like that a lot. So the check your tone thing, I just wrote that down as you were saying that, because for me, like I always say, and I think it's probably true for a lot of people, like I am my own worst critic. Like for me, I don't think anybody is tougher on me than anybody else. And the voices in my head, take it however you want, whatever, are often trying to convince myself that it's going to be worse than it really is. The comment you made about probability versus possibility, I think is fantastic as well. Getting back to my own worst critic, like for me, I also am very, very guilty of moving the goalposts on myself. Like I oftentimes will set goals and I'll say I can do X, Y, and Z. And then I'll do that, but I won't go beyond that or go a little bit beyond that. And then I'm like, oh, why didn't you go beyond that? I'm like, no, that wasn't the goal, right? Like, here's an example. So like this year, for example, my goal was to do 10,000 steps per day on average. Over the last 10 years since I got an Apple Watch, I have data showing how many steps per day I have per year. And like the highest I ever had per day on average for a year was like 7,300 steps. So, going to 10,000 was a very aggressive goal. As of now, so as of mid-October 2025, I'm at about 10,100 steps on average per day, which is ridiculous, right? It's a significant increase versus any year previously. I'm at a point now where if I didn't take a single step the rest of the year, I would still have a personal record for the most steps in a year, which is insane, right? With that said, every day when I look at that and I'm like, oh, I'm only at 10,100. Can I get to 11,000? I'm like, Jeff, give yourself some break, cut yourself some slack, and give yourself some grace. Like the goal was 10,000. We are exceeding that goal. right? Let's not injure ourselves or do anything silly to go beyond that. Like, this is not just an achievable goal, but I've already broken the goal. Like, as long as I keep this pace up for the next 2.5 months, I am there. Like, let's take a step back. Let's celebrate it. Let's be excited about it. Let's not be down on ourselves because we haven't, quote, exceeded the goal by significant amounts. You know what I mean?
I think that's like a very common thought, though, because like even for me, no matter what it is, I'll always find the error, right?
Yeah.
There's always something wrong. There's always something, like I remember my dad being like, you're always like, there's always something wrong. Like you never can just be happy about it. You know, it's just like, and it's like, it's true. It's like, I could always look at it and I could have done something and I could look at it back and that could have been what I wanted to do. And then all of a sudden I'm like, this small piece over here just quite didn't hit the mark, or, with these resources at this time, that's what I could do. I was limited, right? Like, imagine if I could do this with this, and like, and you start to build on that, right? Which it's a gift and a curse, right? Like, you're never really quite satisfied. You just keep going for it.
Yeah, I mean, context is super important, and so is point in time, right? Like, oftentimes I'll look at it and say, 3 years ago, why did I do this differently? It's like, well, you didn't have those data points then, right? You didn't have those tools back then, right? Like, throughout life, as we get older, we're trying to learn, we're trying to build ourselves up more. And it's like saying, oh, when I was in seventh grade or whatever, why didn't I get that test right? It's like, I don't know, because you had the education of a 12-year-old at that point. Like, why would you get that right? Obviously at 48, I would probably get, I like to think, most of those questions correct. But, 30, 40 years ago, whatever, maybe not, because you didn't have a fully developed brain or whatever at that point. It's very weird. And I don't know, like, I always wonder, like, does everybody think this way, or are certain people this way? Like, am I in the anomaly? Am I the normal? Like, do people push themselves this hard and then beat themselves up this badly? Like, I don't know. Like, what's your view on that?
I think it's just us.
Probably. N equals 2, right?
I think it's definitely, I think that's definitely part of what anxiety does for you, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think, I think to a point, everyone has this, right? I think to the point, everybody has those thoughts, those self-doubts, those things that really, it's just a matter of the degree of which you push yourself, right? And I think what you were saying, like around the environment, I learned a lot about your environment, right? I think that when you're put in a certain environment, and there's plenty of studies about this. There was a wonderful TED Talk that was around this as well. Like, if your environment creates certain behaviors, it does force people to change what they're doing, right? Like, it changes what your actions are, your decisions are, and whatever else. And so for me, it's just like, I internalize those things as, okay, this is because I'm not doing this, or this is because I'm not good at this, or this is because of that. Instead of taking a step back and say, like, what is the environment of which I'm in? Is this environment creating the best time for me to like do what I want to do? Is it helping me achieve what I need to achieve? I think a simple example of that is like, if I'm in the movie industry and I'm trying to do that in Utah, right? Like, you're not going to succeed in Utah because your environment is not with the right connections. You need to go to California, right? But like, sitting there in Utah saying like, I'm a terrible person, I can't create this movie, but there's no resources around it, there's not the right environment to it, right? You have to take yourself outside of the environment and see like, what does that mean for me, and what does that do for me? And like, that's a really hard thing. I think a lesson that I had to learn through understanding what my anxiety was doing and how I was behaving within that, and taking a step back and say like, hey, like, this environment is not doing what I need it to do for me to get to where I want to be.
Right. Absolutely. Cool. So with that, I did want to kind of move on a little bit to something else. A text that you sent me, I think it was yesterday. So I don't know what I was doing last night. I think I was at my daughter's color guard competition, and I randomly got a text from Stephanie with just a video of a garden that's on fire. And then I hear a thick Italian accent in the background talking about something. Can you talk me through like what that was? And is that something like, is gardening something you utilize to kind of like help out your mental health, or kind of like, how does that fit into the grand scheme of things?
So long story short, in terms of like what I've done for my mental health, right, is and the long scheme of thing, when I look back at like, why was I unhappy about certain things or what was going on, I realized I had nothing that I had for myself, right? Like, I, at this point, was a mother doing all these things. I had no time for myself. And like, you can't be happy if you don't do anything that you enjoy or that you are fulfilling your life with, right? And I think number one thing is connections, right? There's studies around that too. Like if you connect with people and you have good relationships, it leads to a happy life. So one thing I did was definitely like start creating connections again with my friends, try and make social situation, wherever. The other thing I did was I started to garden. My family from Italy, my grandfather was a respected farmer from where he's in Italy. And I was just like, my whole family in Italy gardens, they all have a green thumb. I'm going to garden too. And I'm like, okay. So it's like one of my first gardens on the side of my house, and I needed to fill it with dirt. We're at Costco. There's bags of dirt. And I'm like, get that one. Let's go. And I didn't know that there's a difference between inside dirt and outside dirt. And I put the inside dirt outside because the dirt is dirt, right? I don't understand what it is. And right. I was like, I'm going to grow these plants from seed because I'm going to make it from a seed to all the way up. I'm not going to cheat. This is going to be my garden. And I was hosting Easter. So I had all these little seedlings in my house. And I'm like, okay, crap. I have to go put them inside the garden because people are coming over. I can't have my house full of plants. We got to go put them outside.
Sure.
I didn't think about like the first frost of the season or whatever it is. And these seeds are outside, they're little plants. And I'm like, oh no, frost is coming. What do I do? And one of my husband's family members was like, oh, easy. Put a mason jar outside next to the plant that's really warm with water, and it will keep the plant from receiving frost. I'm like, okay, yes, let's do that. I already grew these little guys from little tiny seeds. They make it. They need to make it. They need to get all the way through. And I'm like, okay. So I put these mason jars out. Frost comes through. They make it through the night. And I'm like, wow, it kind of worked. Like they're still alive. And then I left them there. And I was supposed to refill them and do that again because another frost night was coming. And I completely forgot because I'm not used to having a garden. And there was a dry fire warning that day in New Jersey. And my mom was coming to go do something for me. And she walks up to my backyard because she parks in the driveway. It's right next to the backyard, the garden, and the driveway. They're right next to each other. And she sees smoke.
Oh, no.
And she's like, what is going on? So she goes out and she sees my garden is on fire. like, what happened here? And the first thing, in my mind, if I think that there's a fire, the first thing I do is like find water, put out the fire, call 911. Like these are the things. And I have had 2 fires in my house prior, and these are the actions I've taken, right? And she's just videotaping my garden on fire, and she's like sending it to me, and it's like hysterical because you hear her with her Italian accent. She's trying to figure out what's going on. She's very confused why there's glass jars in my garden, and it doesn't make any sense. And so,
so that's not a standard Italian salve to put a glass jar in the garden?
No. And so, my garden caught on fire. And so before and for whatever reason, that day, my dad was driving by and he was driving down. I live on a hill, driving down the hill. And he saw like a firefighter putting out a fire on a bush because like there was like a random bush on fire.
Sure.
And then
this isn't biblical either. This is legitimately happening.
Real life. So even before he gets to my house, like he comes in, he sees my mom reacting to this garden that was on fire, and they're like looking at it, and he's like, okay, that's strange, whatever. He goes up and he sees this other fire up the hill, and he's like, oh no. So he comes down the hill and he digs up my whole entire garden and throws it on the side because he's worried that the whole house is going to catch on fire. And so like my poor little garden starts off literally like dead because I had inside soil outside with a magnifying feature of the mason jar essentially. So like I didn't know, it does have a warning sign on the soil that if it's it's indoor use only.
Sure.
And I later learned from Googling that it has some chemicals that should not be exposed, right? So
there it
I
is.
had that situation. The mason jar still had water and the sun was hot. It was a dry heat warning, whatever. And it created a magnifying glass and lit the soil on fire. And then my dad dug the whole thing up. So I was very successful in the first attempt. And then I had some more seedlings, so I replanted it all.
Sure.
And I was just like, it's good. It's in the corner. There's some fencing, wherever. And then I had some animals attack it. Then I had insects attack it. It was a miracle that anything grew that year, but I learned a lot.
So in summary, in your lifetime as an adult, in two very separate events, you had a car go through your living room window and end up in your house, and your garden caught on fire. Right. Yeah. These are two things that the average person probably never experiences either of them. And then you also look at it and say, well, one caused anxiety. The other was supposed to be like a salve or a way to get away from anxiety. But I'm sure your garden catching fire probably didn't help your mental health at all that day.
No, but like at that point, so many tragic things had happened that I was just like, this is my life. Like I had my, prior to this, the first fire in my house in this situation, my dog I had baked cookies to bring to a dinner party. And I went at the time to go get my husband from the train station. We stopped at the liquor store to get a bottle of wine for the party. And we were coming back home to pick up the cookies and I let him get changed because he had business clothes on. And we go into the driveway and our fire alarm is going off. Our dog's going crazy in the window. I'm like, what is happening right now? And then like, okay, sometimes fire alarms go off and it's no fire, right? And we get close. I'm like, it's clearly a fire, right? So I go in, I'm like, oh no, like this is bad. So the whole oven's on fire. The cabinets are on fire. I'm like, what is happening? I saw the burner on. So I turned off the burner. I got the dog on a leash. I get out of the house. I called 911. I'm like, our house is on fire. And I'm just like, I know I turned the burner off. Like I wouldn't have put cookies on top of a burner. Like that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, What is happening? I can't get it. My husband walks into the house because he's always as cool as a cucumber. He goes in, he pulls that like little wand outside the sink and just sprays it down, puts out the fire. The firefighters come. There's like a little bit left. They clear it up. Later on, like when the anxiety started cooling down, we're like, oh, we have a burnt down house here situation. Like, what do we do next? What are the next steps? How do you deal with this? We came to realize that our dog probably wanted the cookies.
Oh no.
And what she did, because I had put them behind like the very end of the oven because I knew she couldn't get to them.
Right.
I didn't want them to be gone before, I got them to bring to the party,
sure.
Which in retrospect, I should have just put them inside the oven. She couldn't get them inside the oven, but I put them on top and she jumped up with her paws and turned on the burner, which caused everything, the plate to explode. And do not put towel paper next to your oven. That is my other hard lesson there. I'll never put towel paper next to the oven. It caught on fire, and that's what caused everything else to go up in flames.
Lessons learned here. So, experiences, that's what happens, right? You look at it, you figure out what to do, what not to do. But, credit to your dog for trying, but unfortunately the results weren't what he or you were looking for. We are running late in time, but I did want to ask you something else that we had talked about before we started recording. But Tomato Sauce Day and Sausage Day. Do you want to kind of give a little insight into what those are and how you enjoy them?
Yeah. So I think a lot of holding traditions true for me, it helps me feel close to my family. I know my family's been doing it for generations and it gives me like that warm, fuzzy feeling in my heart. And so that's why it's so important to me. I take it pretty seriously that we do this every year. There's been a couple of years we weren't able to for one reason or another, but I really enjoy them. And so my family every year does Tomato Sauce Day. And what we do is we gather around together. We get crates and crates of tomatoes. And we're talking about like 50-pound crates. These are not like small little pieces of tomatoes. It's crates of tomatoes. We got like 12 of them, usually 12 to 15, depending on who's in. And we just get together. We get together and we literally do all the steps. And there's many steps. And usually I'm the tomato inspector. By the time I'm done with Tomato Sauce Day, my nose is all red from like smelling tomatoes. And like, you go through and you wash the tomatoes, you inspect the tomatoes, you boil the tomatoes, and you process them through a machine, and they get turned into sauce. And then from sauce, you put them in jarring, and then from jarring, you boil the jars. And it takes a whole day, and you end up eating pizza because there's no time to cook, and you're just running around with jars and tomatoes. I mean, this year we had a little bit of a crisis because we miscounted jars, and then it turns out that all the jars were upstairs because I thought they were downstairs, and we went around looking for more jars. But it's a lot of fun, and we bring it together. It's a lot of hard work, but it's great sauce. And then like we have sauce for the rest of the year, and we don't do it again for the full year. And I cherish that sauce. I don't even share it with anybody because like it's just too good. You can't get this in stores. And the other one that we do is Sausage Day. We literally go, like last year, I went around to like every shop, right, to get the right pork shoulder, to cut it up and grind it into little meat. And then, we're running around. We're very specific about like which ingredient is good enough for our sausage. So like having the right fennel, having the right coriander, having it chopped up the right way, and the right ratio of meat to fat, and like what's going to look like, mixing it together. And the you put wine in there as well, and then you're tasting it and you're having a good time. But then you're like hanging raw meat in your attic. And I guess someone that's not used to doing it, my husband's like, that doesn't sound that
Sure.
that doesn't feel very appealing. But like to me, it's like, this smells amazing. And it's raw meat hanging from your attic, right? So one person that's not used to this or accustomed to it, it's a little strange, right? I can admit to that.
Yeah.
But like, this past year, my mom gave me the honors of allowing me to stuff the sausage. So I got a little bit of an upgrade. She did criticize on my ability to stuff it, but she did allow it.
Okay.
I got to clean the pig intestines. That was another upgrade on my duties this year. And I got to, poke it with a needle because you need to make holes in the sausage. Otherwise it won't fry correctly. And then this year we're actually talking about making some capicola. We've done that in the past. And I wish we did prosciutto. We didn't do that very well that one year, so we'll see. But we do. It's fun, but it is strange, and you have to like really know what you're doing because you could get sick, right? Like it's raw meat, it's being dried. Me and my mom get into it too, like how the meat is turning and what's good enough. And, you're up there putting fans on there when it needs to, because you need to make sure it's staying cool. You have to do it in the winter months because it has to be cold for you to do that. It's not like you can do that in the summer. And you have to do it in very specific timing, and it can go bad real fast if you don't get it right.
Gotcha. So I think I'm starting to understand the expression of you don't want to see how the sausage is made, which is usually applied in various other aspects of life. But I had a visual going through my head as you were describing that. I don't eat sausage, so I think I could probably see why I don't. But I could also see why people who do eat it may not necessarily want to see how it's made. So there's that. How many fridges and freezers do you have with all of this tomato sauce and the sausage or whatever? Like, do you have rooms and rooms full of them? Do you store it at other people's houses? Like, I'd imagine once you jar the tomato sauce and make the sausage, you can't just leave it on the counter forever. It's got to go somewhere and, get cold, right?
You need to put it in somewhat of a colder area. So we have a wine cellar. Inside the wine cellar, there is 3 cabinets that are not displayed for wine. They have tomato sauce inside. And there's sausage hidden in the sides of these cabinets so that they stay cool. You can do this and keep it in a basement and a garage. It's totally fine and suitable. It works. And at times when the wine cellar is full, I have it outside in my utility room, but still in the garage area. And the sauce will stay good for years. The sausage has like about a year or so lifespan because it is meat. You can't keep it forever. But the sausage gets stored in oil. So it's a jar with oil, and then you just take one out as you want. And the mason jar is sealed. So once you boil the jar, it'll seal. And once it seals, it stays good forever. It's just best to not put it in like a very hot space.
To ask my best accounting question, do you guys go with FIFO or LIFO, or do you have a system of how you take out which jar?
Yeah, it's first one in. LIFO, right?
First in, first out is FIFO versus
First
last
in,
in,
first
first
out.
out is
First in,
LIFO.
first out. Yes, I'm
FIFO.
getting confused. Yes, first in, first out. Except this past year, I messed up.
Oh, no.
I thought I had used all the prior year jars, and I did not. And so this year I did cut down my tomato sauce production because I needed to have less, because I have older ones I need to consume first. I missed them. They were in the wine cellar where they should have been, and
Sure.
I thought I grabbed the right year, and I grabbed the wrong one.
Well, I mean, I'm sure we're all guilty of that at some point in our life. So, at least you can fess up to it, right?
Yeah, you
Grabbing
gotta
the
own
wrong
your
year.
mistakes, right?
We all do these things. Awesome. With that said, we are running just about out of time. Is there anything you'd like to support, promote, or plug before we move on for the week?
No, I got nothing of those sorts. Just more, stories. I think if anything, I'd say in spirit and mental health, it really, really changed my life by paying attention to it. Self-care is very important. Just don't ignore that, no matter how much is going on in your life. If there is anybody that wants to talk about anything, again, best with your mental health professional, like whatever, but just know you're not alone. There's a lot of people that, have these issues to various degrees, right? Its severity changes, environment changes, and it might be, temporary, it might be long-term. But I think the most important thing is that you acknowledge it and you make a plan.
Absolutely. Well said. So thank you for sharing, Stephanie. And as always, thank you for joining the show. I do appreciate it. I know we've talked about this for a while. So glad we're able to finally make this happen. With that said, for everybody out there, I want to remind everybody you can find the show on Instagram at Everybody Has a Story Pod. The TikTok is also at Everybody Has a Story Pod. My personal Instagram is at Seltzer77. If you want to be a future guest, definitely DM me at either of those two Instagram accounts. If you want to email the show, you can email at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. For all things Jeff Seltzer, you can check us out at jeffseltzer.com. I want to remind everybody the show is on all podcast platforms for audio, video only on Spotify and YouTube, in addition to audio. Lastly, as it's been a while, I want to thank a friend of the show, buddy of the show, pal of the show, Marcus Brandon, for the great theme song. He sent me other versions, which maybe I'll switch to at some point. But I love it. I dig it. I listen to it in the car sometimes. I'm sure people probably look at it and say, Jeff, it's a song about you while you're listening to it. It's just fun. I don't know. It is what it is. I guess it kind of suits me pretty well. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will be back next week. Have a great, great week, everybody. And again, be safe. If you need help, definitely call a professional or talk to somebody. Thank you.
Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. 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 Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer.